All right. Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the podcast. This is Daniel Johnson, MD. I'm a psychiatrist from Asheville, North Carolina. Today's episode is a special one in that I'm just going to recap how the podcast got started this year, what the purpose of it is, and talk a little bit about the guests who've been on and what I've learned from them, and share a little bit about what's to come. So first off, the podcast itself. Well, it's called Anecdotal Evidence with Daniel Johnson, MD. There's 2 anecdotal evidences out there, and there will probably be more in the future. There's plenty of room for anecdotal evidence in this world. But this podcast is oriented around sharing healing stories, which is currently a process that's being recognized for its value in helping folks who consider themselves to be in recovery, but also for anyone who's interested in learning more about their own health and wellness. And I believe that ultimately we all share that interest. And how we can approach it from a variety of different angles. The reason the podcast got started is because I'd been listening to podcasts a lot in my commute to and from Rutherford County, where I work with an ACT team there. In particular, the WTF podcast with Mark Maron. Got to give him a shout out, as he was my primary inspiration. And I had the idea eventually that the work that I do, where I hear healing stories from the clients in my private practice and from other practitioners and people who I know, that this information needs to be shared. And so it felt like this was a good format for doing it. The basic format of each episode is that I interview a guest and we follow the narrative of their life until a point of interest comes up, and then we expand on that and explore it, in particular with its value to our own sense of self-understanding and how we may have learned lessons from a particular event. Sometimes it's a hardship that the guest has gone through. I use the we here because I'm emphasizing that the stories that we experience in our own lives are shared with others, and the value of empathy in understanding what others have learned about themselves so that we can understand more about ourselves. So yeah, we follow the narrative, the biography of the guest, without, hopefully, indulging too much in the nature of biography. Our identity is more than just the stories that we've experienced. In fact, we're actually writing our own story and rewriting it every day in the practice of life. And so the idea is that in a conversation, we can unearth some of these lessons that we've learned and are learning and share them with others in an educational way and hopefully in an inspiring way. The guests that I had targeted for the podcast are practitioners of the healing arts, as well as folks who have interesting healing experiences and come from other backgrounds, particularly artists, musicians, as well as former clients who are interested in sharing some of their stories with regards to health and healing. And when I say health and healing, I mean our total health, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and all that it entails. So the first guest that I reached out to was Bob Bowman, Robert Bowman, MD, who practiced as an ER physician for many years, a full career in medicine. And towards the end of his career, before he retired, he recultivated an interest in yoga, something that he had explored earlier in life, and he got to know it more. I actually came to know Bob through my girlfriend and partner, Brooke, who was one of his yoga teachers. And she got to watch his progress and his growth and passion for yoga develop and nurture him, and how he shared that. And it was inspirational for her and inspirational for me for a number of reasons, one of which is I'm a physician as well. And I also practice Hatha yoga, and it has changed my life immensely. So it felt great when Bob agreed to be the first guest on the podcast to have a physician and a yogi on there to start things off with a clear intent of the deepening nature of health, and in particular how my discovery of yoga has opened so many doors to me personally and also in my practice. So that's been very exciting. And Bob was the perfect guest to get things started. And what I wasn't prepared for was his sharing of his experience with depression. And that really got me interested even more in this podcast format, because Bob courageously shared how he's gone through episodes of depression and periods of his life where he felt stuck and isolated. And he revealed how the practice of yoga has helped him currently learn how to recognize these episodes as they're coming on and how to move through them as we naturally experience them in our life. And I feel like that message has so much resonance for me, for the folks who I work with who are experiencing or have experienced depression, and really anyone who's just looking to understand depression a little deeper. So that was my first lesson in this world of podcasting, that the story, you're not going to know what you're going to get when you begin talking with someone and getting to know them. Of course, I'd experienced that in my practice as a psychiatrist many times, but in the format of sharing on public record, there's a totally different feel to it. And it was inspiring to see Bob courageously share like that. So I'm grateful to him for getting us off on the right foot in understanding that depression is not a stigma. It's something that we all may go through in life, and many of us do. Most of us do at various times. And it's something where if we can find an opportunity to share our experience in the appropriate time and setting, then it may help others. My second guest was Daniel Nevins, a local artist who is now a friend of mine, and he was referred to me by my creative consultant, Brian Mashburn. And Brian is involved in the podcast in so many ways. We'll get to him later. But Daniel is a visual artist. He's a painter. He's also a musician and a thinker and just an all-around inspirational figure. And I connected with him. I met him at a Christmas party a couple years ago and then reconnected with him for the podcast. And it was really cool because we just sat down at this table and I basically hit record and just listened to him go. And he is an inspiring talker. And it's cool because it comes from an authentic place. He has lived it in his life as an artist, and it's taken some turns, but he has a depth about him, and he's eager to share it. He just recently opened up a local exhibit here in Asheville at the Tucker Cook Gallery at UNC Asheville, where he has depicted the story of the Torah in 42 paintings. And these are gorgeous paintings. If anyone happens to catch this in time to check out the exhibit, please do. It's worth your while. And he also has his abstract work on display there as well. And those create this sensation within that is hard to put into words. So I'm thankful to Daniel for getting us going with some real good storytelling, and also being a partner in this podcast being launched. It's been great getting to know him this year. My third guest was Brian Lewis, MD. Brian is a family physician here in town. He's an integrative family physician, and he and I went to med school together for a period of time in Chapel Hill, UNC Chapel Hill. And we've known each other in Asheville, but we hadn't had a chance really to talk much. And so I got to know Brian in a totally different way from talking to him for the podcast, and was blown away by his journeys in meditation and his understanding that the practice of meditation is one that opens us up, can open us up, and that we want to hold on to our sense of being grounded and our connection to our roots and the connection to the tradition that meditation is practiced in order for it to be a therapeutic deepening of self-understanding. And he shared his personal experience with that, and I'm very grateful for that. Brian is a celebrated physician here in Asheville because his practice is he has a pilot practice for developing a new system of health insurance, and he's been recognized here in town by the Mountain Express a few times for being one of the best doctors in town, and I've heard great things from his patients, and I've just enjoyed getting to know him in this process with the podcast, so that was cool as well. And then the fourth episode was Corey Costanza. And Corey, like many of my guests, is trained in many disciplines. He's a somatic experience therapist. He's a massage therapist, Esalen massage therapist. He plays the didgeridoo, and now he owns this isolation saltwater flotation tank, which is a place to float in safely and comfortably and to meditate without the intrusions of modern life. And it's a fascinatingly unique experience. I've done it 3 times. That's how I met Corey. And in getting to know him, he also was very courageous in sharing some of the difficulties he went through. He and I both have experienced panic attacks in our lives, and he talked about that and how he had to figure out his way to stay present and get through those experiences, which was very similar to my process when I was experiencing panic attacks. He also talked about a tragic event in Thailand and how it shaped his life after he was involved in a tragic scooter accident where another person lost their life. And I found him to be such a warm and engaging person, and he again courageously shared his inspirational story. So at this point, I'm really cooking along here. That was my 4th conversation in the 4th episode, and at that point I knew that this was a format I really wanted to continue with. Episode 5 is with Ryan Kirk Zak, a Vedic astrologer from West Virginia. And we traced his biography as he shared how he grew up a very curious person and followed his curiosity into different readings and teachings, and how when he discovered massage therapy, in particular craniosacral massage, it woke him up to the experience within his body, and how it was beyond just basic sensation. There was something connected with it. And this later led him into the meditative arts, into Kriya Yoga, which he is a teacher of and has written a book about Kriya Yoga. And he advanced this even further to a career in Vedic astrology. I hope I'm getting the chronology right, because again, he's multi-talented as all of these folks are. And we talk about astrology and how it fits in with a meditation practice, and how it's not a system of predestination, but it's a guideline to deepen our sense of self-awareness, to learn who we are, and to understand that our lives are going to be filled with both positive and negative aspects, and how to meditate on those aspects, how to learn that difficulties and successes occur in cycles, and to be open to those experiences as they arise, so that we don't burn up all our energy in a state of resistance of them, but can work with these processes as we experience it. Very important information for understanding healing, the big picture of it. So he articulated this very well in a very long conversation, and also gave me a lot of tips about podcasting and how to get this format out there. And I'm just very grateful for meeting Ryan, and we've developed a friendship as well. So I'm hopeful that we'll get a chance to talk some more in the future in this format. The sixth episode was with another new friend, yet another one, Brack Jeffries. And Brack, again, is multi-talented. In the episode, you hear all about it, but in particular, he shared his personal story of how when he got clean from substances in his early 20s, he began to awaken to a new possibility of life, and he's followed it down all these different avenues of healing: massage therapist, nurse, substance abuse counselor, and holotropic breath work, which is how I heard of Brack from when I went to a holotropic breathwork conference in 2013. And they were like, yeah, when you get back to Asheville, you got to catch up with Brack Jeffries. And I just finally now have, and what a warm and engaging individual, brilliant intellectual and talented healer. And we're from the same part, Eastern North Carolina, so that was cool to connect on that. And just another great conversation. That was episode 6. And then episode 7 is with Vishnu Das, who is the curriculum director and one of the leaders of the Asheville School of Massage and Yoga's Ayurvedic Wellness Counseling Program, where Brooke just finished up. She's a recent graduate. And as soon as I started talking about the podcast, Vishnu came to mind, because she was well along in the program and blown away by his depth of knowledge. And he is a great talker. And so I'm really grateful that he came on and shared. It was a particularly difficult time for him because he had just lost his sister earlier this year. And this occurred right after he had shoulder surgery, and it's been a tough year for him. And he took the time out from his very busy life to share some of his story with us. And it, of course, is a fantastic story and very interesting. And at the end, he talks a good bit about Ayurveda, which he describes as ancient common sense, and shares all kinds of wisdom about it, how it fits in with any lifestyle. You don't have to be a vegetarian. You certainly don't have to be a Hindu or a Buddhist. It fits in with spiritual practices of all varieties, and with all kinds of physical constitutions, and people of all types can benefit from Ayurveda, which is just a process of understanding ancient common sense. And the guest that brings us up to date is one of my yoga teachers, Louis Rothline, who teaches Ashtanga yoga. And this was another cool experience because I've been going to Lewis's classes for over 3 years before I reached out to him. And, you know, as it is in yoga classes, he doesn't really talk much about his personal life. So I knew very little about him, but I knew enough to be intrigued. I knew he had run marathons earlier in his life, that he had owned a yoga studio in Florida, and yet I just knew the tip of the iceberg, as I came to discover that he contains multitudes, as we all do. And he shares a variety of his experiences, and I did not know he was as old as he was, because he appears so much younger. He's taken really great care of himself, and he has such a wonderful depth of knowledge and wisdom about healing, and yet a tremendous humility as well. And so he just doesn't go around tooting his own horn, he teaches. So yet another very interesting conversation. And I'm grateful for having that opportunity to interview one of my yoga teachers. And he gets into Ashtanga yoga and the discipline of yoga in general. So just a fascinating experience and highly recommended. So that brings us up to date with the episodes, where we're at now. I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break from putting these episodes together for a couple weeks. Going to the beach for a needed vacation, and there's going to be some new beginnings and new structure in my professional life in the future, which I'm excited to share with you in the future as well. And some really exciting episodes of the podcast coming up as well. As you may have noticed, all of my guests so far have been men. So there's been some lacking of a woman's perspective in this podcast to a certain extent. I mean, Brooke has been advising me all along and is definitely my partner in creation with this podcast as well. But we've been really looking forward to having some woman guests, and there's going to be a number of those coming up. Robin Saraswati Marcus, Dr. Saraswati, who is a Chinese medicine doctor and senior yoga teacher, who, I say senior because she has just recently been honored for her outstanding teaching at the Asheville Yoga Conference this past summer, the day I happened to interview her, serendipitously. But we have a very inspiring conversation for me that I'm excited to share with you, because she shares how she's been able to blend the worlds of yoga and Chinese medicine in her life here in the West seamlessly and in a true integrated manner. And she's just such a great teacher. It was a cool conversation because she just effortlessly began to teach during the conversation, and you'll hear it. And I'm just kind of hanging on her every word. So I'm excited about sharing that with you. That one's coming up. And I also have a conversation with Cricket Greer, who is yet another multidimensional and multi-talented individual. She is a psychotherapist. She's also a talented singer and musician and a dancer, a yoga teacher, massage therapist. She works with her partner Vishnu Das in an Ayurvedic practice and has a depth of understanding about Jungian psychology and all kinds of things to share. And she gets into it in the context of her life, which I just found the whole conversation fascinating and yet again took a whole lot from it. And just wrapped up a conversation with Caroline Proctor, who is another acupuncturist and has an interesting background as well, because she's also a practicing Presbyterian minister. And so we get to hear again about the integration of different schools of teaching and across different spiritual beliefs, different faiths, and how we can draw from these, no matter what our background is. We can figure out a way to integrate this in our own life and in our practice. And she practices, of course, she's a pastor, and she pastors 2 people, but she practices the healing arts through massage therapy, or she is a massage therapist, but through acupuncture and Chinese medicine as well. So it's just fascinating hearing these folks' experiences. Oh, I forgot a couple more. Eddie LaSure is a meditation teacher with over 20 years of teaching, over 20 years experience of teaching meditation, and has a very interesting personal life history, which he shares with a fascinating story that I don't want to give away, but his life was connected with an historical event you've probably heard of. And yet what he reveals is that stories and just being a part of an historical event, if and of itself, is just a story and it's empty. But he shares how he was able to draw from this experience as he grew on in life, how that singular experience shaped him, but it wasn't until years down the road as he grew and developed into a practitioner of the healing arts that he was able to fully integrate his process, grow from it, heal from it, and has been sharing the value of meditation and integration for some time. So you're going to love that one. And you're also going to love an upcoming conversation with Stephen Martin, who is an astronomer, and he and I share a curiosity for conversation. He's written a book called Cosmic Conversations, which I highly recommend if you're interested in the interface between the worlds of science and spirituality and culture. He did kind of what I'm doing, in that he just made a list of people who he knew he wanted to talk to and learn from, and these are some real luminaries in these fields, and had conversations with them where he asked them questions that they may never have been asked before. And he got to talk to some of my role models, like Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, and a number of other people. So just a very interesting conversation about life, the universe, and everything. Some other ones in the works, which I'm excited about sharing in various stages of production, and you'll hear them as they come out. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to kind of bring you up to speed, give you a few weeks to catch up with the episodes, if you'd like, because it takes a lot of time listening to these. But if you're interested, I think that it's time well spent. Of course, I'm totally biased. I'm a participant in all of this, but I say that on behalf of the guests who've shared so much. I've learned so much from my conversations with these folks, and I hope you continue to do so as well. The plan is to continue to release these, hopefully on a weekly basis. Brian Mashburn, who I mentioned earlier, he's an Asheville visual artist, incredible painter. Check out his art online, brianmashburnart.com. And he's done the episode covers for these, and has utilized some of his paintings for these, which I'm grateful for. But he's going to be helping me in production as well, and we're recruiting some other production assistants. So we are in the process of growing the podcast and continuing to develop it, and I appreciate you tuning in to this work in progress, a metaphor for our lives. So thanks again, and and I look forward to sharing with you in the future. Today is the 2nd of October, Friday. It's been raining for a few days. We got a hurricane coming up. We're actually going to be driving towards a hurricane as it's still heading towards the coast. So, going to be keeping my thoughts and prayers for the people who've been affected by this hurricane. And we're going to go down to the beach, and we're hopefully going to go down to the beach and get some rest and relaxation and return rejuvenated to share with you some more anecdotal evidence. So thanks again. Until next time, I'll see you then.